What if I told you that one glass of water could change your entire life? That a single act of kindness to a stranger could transform you from broken to a billionaire's bride? This is the true story of how compassion conquered cruelty, and how one woman's gentle heart won her everything she never dared to dream of. But before we dive into this incredible journey, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. Now let's begin. Let me tell you about a moment that changed everything. A moment so small, so simple, that most people would have missed it entirely. But sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the greatest power. This is the story of Isabella Romano, and it begins on an ordinary Tuesday morning in Milan, Italy, in a place where cruelty wore designer labels and kindness was considered weakness. Isabella was 25 years old, but she carried the weight of someone much older. Life hadn't been kind to her. No family to call when things got hard. No safety net to catch her when she fell. Just her, a tiny apartment she could barely afford, and a job that slowly crushed her spirit every single day. She worked at Elegance Boutique, one of the most exclusive fashion stores in Milan's luxury district. The kind of place where a single handbag cost more than most people earned in 6 months. Where the air smelled like imported perfume and old money. Where the staff judged you before you even opened your mouth. And Isabella? She didn't belong there. At least, that's what they told her. Every single day. Her manager, Vivian Beaumont, was a woman who had perfected the art of cruelty. Tall, elegant, with perfectly styled auburn hair and a smile that could cut glass. Vivian treated Isabella less like an employee and more like a servant she was forced to tolerate. Isabella. Vivian's voice rang out that Tuesday morning, sharp and impatient. Stop standing around like a fool. I need you to pick up my dry cleaning. Then get coffee, the good kind from Via Montenapoleone. And don't you dare bring back that cheap garbage like last time. Isabella nodded quietly. Yes, ma'am. The other staff members, Claudette and Margot, exchanged knowing smirks. They were senior sales associates, dressed in clothes Isabella could never afford, dripping with contempt for the girl they considered beneath them. Poor thing, Claudette whispered loudly enough for Isabella to hear. She actually thinks she's going to make a sale someday. Margot laughed. Please, look at her shoes. Probably bought them at a discount store. How can she possibly understand luxury? Isabella's cheeks burned, but she kept her head down. She needed this job. She had rent to pay. Bills piling up. No one else would hire her without experience, and Vivian made sure she never got enough experience to leave. Whenever Isabella managed to engage a customer, Vivian would swoop in at the last moment, steal the sale, and pocket the commission. When expensive items went missing, Isabella was the first one blamed. When the stockroom needed organizing, it was always Isabella who stayed late unpaid, scrubbing floors while the others went home. You should be grateful, Vivian would say, looking down her nose at Isabella. A girl like you? With no connections, no education, no class? You're lucky I even let you work here. And Isabella endured it all. Because what choice did she have? That afternoon, as Isabella carefully folded silk scarves near the front window, the boutique door opened. Not with the gentle chime that announced wealthy customers, but with a hesitant creak. An elderly man stepped inside. Isabella looked up, and her breath caught. His coat was worn thin at the elbows. His shoes had seen better days, scuffed leather with the sole beginning to separate. His hair was gray and uncombed, his face weathered with deep lines that spoke of a hard life. He looked around the boutique with quiet wonder, like a child seeing something magical for the first time. The reaction was immediate. Claudette's nose wrinkled in disgust. Oh, you cannot be serious. Margot took a step back, as if poverty were contagious. Sir, she called out, her voice dripping with disdain. This is a luxury establishment. I think you've made a mistake. The elderly man smiled gently, showing yellowed teeth. I just wanted to look around, if that's all right. The click of expensive heels announced Vivian's arrival. She strode across the polished marble floor, her eyes scanning the old man from head to toe with unconcealed revulsion. Absolutely not, Vivian said coldly. This boutique serves an exclusive clientele. We are part of Impro Fashion Group. Do you understand what that means? We maintain certain standards. And you, sir, do not meet them. The other staff members snickered. A customer in a fur coat actually took out her phone to record the scene, amused by the spectacle. The elderly man's smile faded slightly. I understand. I'll leave. But something inside Isabella snapped. Maybe it was because she knew exactly how he felt. She knew what it was like to be judged by your clothes, your appearance, your bank account. She knew what it was like to be treated as less than human because you didn't have enough zeros in your balance. She knew what it was like to be invisible. Before she could second-guess herself, Isabella quickly walked over to the old man. She gently touched his arm, and he looked at her with surprised, watery eyes. Sir, she said softly, her voice warm and genuine. Would you like some water? Please sit down. Take your time. The boutique fell silent. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Isabella, what do you think you're doing? Isabella ignored her. She guided the elderly man to a velvet chair near the window, the chair reserved for VIP clients, and hurried to get him a glass of cold water. Claudette gasped dramatically. She put him in the Valentino chair. She's lost her mind, Margot muttered. But Isabella didn't care. She returned with the water, her hands steady, her smile sincere. The old man took the glass with trembling fingers, and when he looked up at her, there were tears in his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. You are very kind. Isabella knelt beside him, smoothing her simple dress. Take all the time you need, sir. If you'd like to look at anything, I'm happy to help. The old man studied her face for a long moment. Then he reached out with his rough, wrinkled hand and gently patted hers. Goodness is never forgotten, my child, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. Remember that. Kindness always finds its way back to you. Isabella didn't know why, but those words struck something deep in her heart. She blinked back tears and nodded. And then everything changed. The old man, Signore Moretti, though Isabella didn't know his name yet, finished his water and set the glass down carefully. He cleared his throat and looked at Isabella with suddenly bright, alert eyes. Young lady, he said, his voice stronger now. I would like your help with something. Isabella smiled. Of course, sir. Anything. I need 10 outfits. Complete ensembles. The finest suits you have. Silk shirts. Designer shoes. Everything. The boutique went dead silent. Isabella's heart leaped. 10 complete outfits? That would be the biggest sale of her life. Maybe, just maybe, this would prove her worth. Maybe Vivian would finally see that she deserved to be there. 10. Isabella repeated, her voice barely a whisper. Yes. Signore Moretti nodded seriously. I want the best. Isabella's mind raced. This was it. Her moment. She straightened her shoulders and smiled brightly. I'll take excellent care of you, sir. Let me show you our finest collection. For the next hour, Isabella worked with focused dedication. She selected charcoal suits with perfect tailoring. Silk ties in deep burgundy and navy. Leather shoes that cost more than her monthly rent. She matched colors, adjusted sizes, and treated Signore Moretti with the same respect she would give royalty. The other staff watched from a distance, whispering and snickering. This is going to be hilarious, Claudette said. I almost feel bad for her, Margot added. Almost. Vivian stood with her arms crossed, an amused smirk playing on her lips. Let her waste her time. This should be entertaining. Finally, Isabella laid out the complete selection on the counter. 10 beautiful outfits, perfectly coordinated. Her hands trembled slightly with excitement. Sir, I think you'll look absolutely wonderful in these, she said, her voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. The total comes to 28,000 euros. The boutique held its breath. Signore Moretti patted his pockets thoughtfully. Then he sighed, a small, apologetic smile on his face. Oh dear, he said quietly. I seem to have forgotten my wallet. Time stopped. Then the laughter began. It started with Claudette, a sharp, cruel bark of amusement. Then Margot joined in, her laughter high and mocking. The other staff members couldn't contain themselves. Even customers began to chuckle, holding their designer bags and shaking their heads at the pathetic scene. Are you kidding me? Claudette shrieked through her laughter. She actually fell for it. An hour. Margot gasped. She wasted an hour on a beggar. Vivian slowly walked forward, her heels clicking like a countdown. Her face was a mixture of satisfaction and contempt. She stopped directly in front of Isabella, so close that Isabella could smell her expensive perfume. "You really are stupid, aren't you?" Vivian said softly, her voice venomous. "You actually believe this homeless man could afford 28,000 euros? Isabella's smile froze on her face. She turned to Signore Moretti, confusion and hurt in her eyes. "Sir, you don't have any money?" The old man looked genuinely distressed. "I do have money, my dear. Quite a lot of it, actually. But my grandson manages everything for me. I just need to find him." "His grandson?" Vivian threw her head back and laughed. "Oh, this is perfect. The broke old man has a rich grandson. How convenient." The staff erupted in fresh waves of mockery. Someone pulled out their phone to film. Isabella felt her face burning with humiliation, but she couldn't look away from Signore Moretti's sad, gentle eyes. And then something unexpected happened. Instead of yelling, instead of crying, instead of running away, Isabella simply smiled. A soft, genuine smile that somehow made the laughter feel hollow. "It's okay, sir," she said gently, reaching out to take his weathered hand. "Don't worry about it." The laughter faltered. Vivian's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" Isabella ignored her completely. She reached into her small purse and pulled out the last of her money, a crumpled 20-euro note and a few coins. Everything she had until her next paycheck, which Vivian would probably find a way to reduce anyway. She pressed the money into Signore Moretti's trembling hands. "Here, sir," Isabella said softly. "Please take this. At least get a taxi home. And maybe something warm to eat." Signore Moretti stared at the money, then at Isabella, his eyes filling with tears. "My child," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You are a rare soul. So very rare." Vivian's face contorted with rage. "I warned you, Isabella. I told you not to bring trash into this boutique. Impro Fashion Group has standards to maintain. We serve the elite of society, not street beggars. And you," she pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Isabella, "you are ruining our reputation." Isabella stood slowly, her chin raised, her eyes dry. "You're fired," Vivian said coldly. "Get out of my store. Now!" Isabella took a deep breath. She picked up her simple coat and her worn purse. She looked one last time at Signore Moretti, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something knowing. Something hopeful. Then she walked out of Elegance Boutique with her head held high. She didn't know that Signore Moretti remained standing there, watching her disappear down the busy Milan street, a small smile playing on his weathered lips. She didn't know that her entire life was about to change. She didn't know that in 48 hours, she would stand in a mansion worth more than the entire boutique. She didn't know that the homeless beggar she had helped was actually the patriarch of a billion-euro fashion empire. And she certainly didn't know that the most powerful man in Milan was about to fall in love with her. But all of that was coming. For now, Isabella Romano walked alone down the street, jobless and heartbroken, with nothing but 20 euros to her name and a heart that still believed in kindness. And sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes that's everything. You know what's interesting about life? Sometimes the universe watches us. It tests us. It puts us in impossible situations just to see what we're made of. And when we pass that test, when we choose kindness over cruelty, compassion over convenience, that's when magic happens. Isabella Romano had no idea she had just passed the most important test of her life. Signore Moretti stood in the boutique for a moment longer, watching through the window as Isabella's figure grew smaller in the distance. The staff were still laughing, congratulating themselves on the entertainment. Vivian was already barking orders at someone else, her cruelty redirected to a new target. The old man turned slowly, his posture straightening. His eyes, which had seemed tired and watery just moments before, now gleamed with sharp intelligence. "You should not judge people by their appearance," he said quietly, but his voice carried across the marble floors. Vivian rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, please. Spare me the lecture, old man." She crossed her arms, her designer bracelet catching the light. "Do you have any idea where you are? Impro Fashion Group is a billion-euro empire. This boutique serves only the most elite clientele in Milan. People like you," she wrinkled her nose, "simply do not belong here." Signore Moretti smiled sadly. "Wealth is not just about money, young lady. It's about the heart. And yours," he paused, looking directly at her, "is very poor indeed." Vivian's face flushed with anger. That's IT. Security. Two large men in dark suits rushed forward immediately. Remove this man from my store, Vivian ordered, her voice sharp. He has no right to stand here and lecture me about anything. The guards moved toward Signore Moretti, but he simply raised his hand calmly. There's no need for force, gentlemen. I'm leaving. He walked slowly toward the door, then paused and looked back one last time at Vivian and her staff, who were already celebrating their victory. You have no idea what you've just lost, he said softly. No idea at all. Then he stepped out into the afternoon sun. Vivian smirked, turning to her staff. Finally. Now, can we please get back to serving real customers? They had no idea. No idea that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Signore Moretti hailed a taxi, his movements suddenly smooth and assured. He slid into the back seat and gave the driver an address. As the car wound through Milan's busy streets, the old man gazed out the window, lost in thought. He had seen true kindness today. The kind of kindness that came with sacrifice. The kind that couldn't be faked or bought. And he had also seen true cruelty. 20 minutes later, the taxi pulled up to a massive estate on the outskirts of the city. The driver's eyes widened in shock as the golden gates swung open automatically. Sir, is this your home? Signore Moretti simply smiled and handed him a generous tip. Have a blessed day, my friend. The estate was breathtaking. Manicured gardens stretched as far as the eye could see. Marble fountains sparkled in the sunlight. The villa itself was a masterpiece of Italian architecture. 3 stories of cream-colored stone, with balconies wrapped in flowering vines. Inside, the luxury was almost overwhelming. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Crystal chandeliers that cast rainbow light across silk wallpaper. Original artwork, Caravaggio, Modigliani, Botticelli, lined the walls like a private museum. And in the center of the grand living room stood Alessandro Moretti. At 32 years old, Alessandro was everything his grandfather had once been, but refined by modern power. Tall and commanding, with dark hair styled perfectly, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that missed nothing. His custom suit probably cost more than most people's cars. He exuded authority the way other men exuded cologne. Naturally, unavoidably. He was the CEO of Impro Fashion Group, the youngest billionaire in Italy, and one of the most powerful men in European fashion. Magazines called him the Prince of Milan. Business journals called him ruthless. Women called him irresistible. But right now, he just looked worried. No. Alessandro's deep voice filled the room as he rushed forward. Where have you been? You've been gone for hours. I had security searching everywhere. Signore Moretti chuckled, embracing his grandson. Relax, Alessandro. I was perfectly safe. Safe? You disappeared without your phone, without security. I was testing the world, my boy. The old man's eyes twinkled. And I found something very interesting. Alessandro frowned, his sharp mind already working. Testing the world? What does that mean? Signore Moretti gestured for them to sit. Then, slowly and carefully, he told Alessandro everything. The boutique. The staff's cruelty. Vivian's contempt. And Isabella, sweet, kind Isabella, who had treated him like a human being when no one else would. As his grandfather spoke, Alessandro's expression grew darker and darker. By the time the story finished, his jaw was clenched so tight it could crack diamonds. They treated you like that? His voice was dangerously quiet. In our boutique? In a store that belongs to Impero. Signore Moretti nodded. But the girl, Alessandro. Isabella Romano. She was different. She gave me her last money, expecting nothing in return. She defended me when she had everything to lose. Alessandro stood abruptly, his hands curling into fists. They threw you out of a store we own. They humiliated you. They revealed themselves. His grandfather interrupted gently. And so did she. Alessandro began pacing, his mind racing with fury and strategy. I want the security footage. I want to see everything. He turned to his assistant, Paolo, a sharp-dressed man in his 40s who had materialized silently in the doorway. Get me every second of footage from Elegance Boutique today. And Paolo. Alessandro's voice dropped to ice. Find Isabella Romano. I want to know everything about her. Where she lives, her background, everything. Paolo nodded and disappeared. 10 minutes later, Alessandro sat in his private office, watching the security footage on a wall-sized screen. He saw it all. The staff's disgust, Vivian's cruelty, his grandfather's quiet dignity. And then, Isabella. Alessandro leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the screen. He watched her walk over when everyone else walked away. Watched her offer water with genuine warmth. Watched her spend an hour carefully selecting outfits, treating his grandfather with respect and patience. And then, the moment that changed everything. He watched Isabella take out her last euros. Watched her press them into his grandfather's hands. Watched her smile softly as she walked out with her head held high, even as the entire boutique mocked her. Alessandro replayed that moment 3 times. No one had ever surprised him before. In his world, everyone wanted something. Everyone had an angle. Everyone played games. But this girl, this Isabella Romano, she had given everything and asked for nothing. Alessandro sat back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers, his brilliant mind working. "Find her," he murmured to himself. "I need to meet this woman." Meanwhile, Isabella walked through Milan's streets in a daze. She was jobless, broke, humiliated. The afternoon sun felt too bright, the city too loud, her future too uncertain. She had given her last money to a stranger. She had nothing left. No job, no prospects, no idea where her next meal would come from. But somehow she didn't regret it. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the sleek black Mercedes that had been following her for the past 3 blocks. The car rolled to a smooth stop beside her. Isabella froze. The tinted window descended, and a professional-looking man in an expensive suit leaned out. He had kind eyes but an authoritative presence. "Miss Isabella Romano?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. Isabella's heart hammered. "Why, yes." The man smiled slightly. "My name is Paolo Ricci. I'm the personal assistant to Signore Alessandro Moretti, CEO of Impero Fashion Group." Isabella's breath caught. "Impero? The company that owned the boutique? My employer would very much like to meet you," Paolo continued. "Please come with me. I assure you, you'll be perfectly safe." Isabella took a step back, her mind screaming that this had to be some kind of trap. Why would a billionaire CEO want to meet her? I think there's been a mistake," she stammered. Paolo shook his head. "No mistake, Miss Romano. Signore Alessandro has specifically requested your presence at the Moretti estate. It concerns the gentleman you helped today." Isabella's eyes widened. "The old man? Is he okay?" "He's perfectly well. In fact, he's eager to see you again." Isabella hesitated, every instinct telling her this was insane. But something in Paolo's steady gaze, something in the mention of the kind old man, made her nod slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll come." Paolo opened the car door, and Isabella slid into the softest leather seat she'd ever felt. The door closed with a whisper-quiet click, and the Mercedes pulled smoothly into traffic. As they drove, Isabella clutched her worn purse and stared out the window, her mind spinning. What was happening? Why did they want to see her? Was she in trouble? 20 minutes later, the car turned onto a private road. Isabella gasped as golden gates swung open, revealing the most magnificent estate she had ever seen. This can't be real," she breathed. Paolo smiled. "Welcome to Villa Moretti, Miss Romano." The car glided to a stop in front of the grand entrance. Staff in crisp uniforms rushed forward to open her door. Isabella stepped out on shaking legs, feeling like she'd stumbled into a fairy tale. "This way, please," Paolo said gently, guiding her up marble steps. The entrance hall took her breath away. Soaring ceilings, glittering chandeliers, artwork that belonged in museums. Everything was gold and cream and absolutely perfect. And then she heard footsteps. Isabella looked up, and her heart stopped. At the top of the grand staircase stood the most striking man she had ever seen. Tall and powerful, with dark, intense eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than everything she'd ever owned combined. She recognized him instantly. Everyone in Milan knew that face. Alessandro Moretti, the billionaire, the CEO, the man every woman in Italy dreamed about. He was even more devastating in person. Isabella's mouth went dry. Her hands trembled. She suddenly became hyper-aware of her simple, worn clothes, her scuffed shoes, her complete and utter ordinariness. Alessandro descended the stairs slowly, his gaze never leaving her face. When he reached the bottom, he extended his hand. "Miss Romano," he said, his voice deep and smooth like dark chocolate. "I'm Alessandro Moretti. Thank you for coming." Isabella somehow managed to shake his hand. His grip was warm, firm, confident. I'm Isabella," she whispered, then immediately felt stupid. He obviously knew her name. Alessandro's lips curved into a small smile, as if he found her nervousness charming. And then, there she is. Isabella turned quickly, and her face lit up with relief. Signore Moretti walked into the hall, his face glowing with happiness. But now he was dressed in an elegant silk shirt and pressed trousers. He looked different, dignified, wealthy. "Isabella, my dear girl." He opened his arms warmly. "Signore Moretti." Isabella rushed forward, then stopped awkwardly. You live here?" The old man chuckled deeply, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Oh yes, my dear. I'm not quite as poor as I appeared, am I?" Isabella's mind reeled. This kind old man lived in a palace? Signore Moretti took her hands gently. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for your kindness today. You have no idea what it meant to me." Then he turned to Alessandro, his expression becoming serious and purposeful. "This," he said firmly, squeezing Isabella's hands, "is exactly the kind of woman you should marry." Isabella's eyes went wide as saucers. Her face flushed crimson. Oh no, that's not, I mean. She laughed nervously, waving her hands in embarrassment. "Really, I was just being nice." But when she glanced at Alessandro, her words died in her throat. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't making a joke out of his grandfather's suggestion. He was just staring at her. A long, intense, unreadable stare that made Isabella's heart race for reasons she didn't understand. And in that moment, standing in a marble palace wearing her cheap clothes, Isabella Romano realized that her simple, ordinary life had just become very, very complicated. You know what they say about fairy tales, right? They make everything look easy. The prince falls in love, the girl accepts, and boom, happily ever after. But real life? Real life is messy. Real life tests you in ways you never imagined. And sometimes before you get your crown, you have to walk through fire. This is where Isabella's story gets complicated. This is where everything she thought she knew about herself, and about love, would be put to the ultimate test. Isabella sat nervously in the Moretti Villa's grand sitting room, feeling completely out of place among the velvet furniture and priceless art. Alessandro sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp and observant. "I ran a background check on you," he said calmly, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. Isabella's head snapped up. "You what?" Alessandro leaned back in his chair. "I wanted to know more about the woman who gave my grandfather her last money. And I discovered something interesting." Isabella's throat went dry. "What did you discover?" His expression softened slightly. "You're alone. No family. No support system. You've been taking care of yourself since you were 17. Isabella looked down at her hands, shame creeping up her neck. Hearing it said out loud somehow made her loneliness feel more real, more pathetic. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," Alessandro said firmly. "You've survived. That takes strength." Before Isabella could respond, Paolo entered with several staff members, all carrying elegantly wrapped boxes. What is this?" Isabella asked, standing up in confusion. "A thank you," Alessandro said simply, "for helping my grandfather." One servant opened a box revealing designer dresses, Versace, Armani, Dolce & Gabbana, each one worth thousands of euros. Another box contained shoes that looked like they belonged in a museum. A third held a handbag that Isabella recognized from magazine covers. And then Paolo stepped forward with a small black velvet box. Isabella's breath caught as he opened it to reveal car keys, elegant, heavy, clearly expensive. "A Maserati Gran Turismo," Alessandro said casually. "It's yours." Isabella's jaw dropped. "What? No. No. I can't accept this." Alessandro raised an eyebrow, clearly not used to being refused. "Why not?" "Because," Isabella's voice shook with emotion, "because I didn't help your grandfather for rewards. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because he's a human being who deserved kindness." She stepped back from the gifts as if they might burn her. I don't want your money or your cars or your designer clothes. That's not who I am. The room fell silent. Alessandro stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Then, slowly, a genuine smile spread across his face. Not his usual polite smile, but something real, something warm. You're different, he murmured, almost to himself. Truly different. Signore Moretti, who had been watching from the doorway, clapped his hands together with delight. I told you, Alessandro. This girl is special. He walked over to Isabella, his eyes twinkling. If you won't accept the gifts, my dear, then at least accept this. Stay here with us for a while. Keep an old man company. This villa is too big and too quiet. I would love to have your warmth here. Isabella hesitated. Living in this palace? It seemed impossible, overwhelming. But the old man's kind eyes pleaded with such genuine affection that she couldn't bring herself to refuse. Okay, she said softly. Just for a little while. Signore Moretti beamed. Alessandro watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. And neither of them noticed the storm that was about to arrive. 3 days later, Isabella was just beginning to adjust to life in the villa when the sound of screeching tires announced an unwelcome visitor. A bright red Ferrari came racing up the driveway, stopping dramatically in a spray of gravel. The door flew open, and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd walked off a fashion runway. Viviana Castellano. She was stunning in that calculated, intimidating way. Razor-sharp cheekbones, platinum blonde hair styled in perfect waves, a designer dress that probably cost more than Isabella's entire year of rent. Her heels were Louboutin, her sunglasses Chanel, her attitude absolutely venomous. Isabella was in the garden reading when she heard Viviana's voice ring through the villa. Alessandro. Isabella's stomach dropped. She recognized that tone, the possessive, entitled fury of someone who thought they owned something. She quietly made her way closer, staying out of sight but able to hear. Alessandro appeared in the main hall, adjusting his shirt cuffs with cool indifference. Viviana. Don't you Viviana me. She stormed toward him, her heels clicking like gunshots. What is SHE doing here? If you're referring to Isabella, she's our guest. Viviana laughed harshly. Guest? Guest? Alessandro, open your eyes. She's a nobody. A social climber. She's probably spent her whole life dreaming of trapping a rich man, and now she's... Enough! Alessandro's voice cut through her rant like ice. But Viviana was just getting started. She whirled around and spotted Isabella standing near the doorway. You! Viviana's perfectly made-up face twisted with rage. Do you have any idea who I am? I've been in Alessandro's life for years. I am the daughter of the Castellano family. And you're just some poor little shop girl who got lucky. Isabella felt her face burn, but she held her ground. I'm not trying to be anything, she said quietly. I'm just what? Just innocently living in his house? Just accidentally catching his attention. Viviana's voice dripped with sarcasm. Please. I've seen women like you before. You act all humble and sweet, but the second a rich man looks your way, suddenly you're in love. That's not true, Isabella said, her voice stronger now. Really? Viviana stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming. So you're telling me you feel nothing for Alessandro? You haven't thought about what it would be like to be with him? To have access to his money, his power, his world? Before Isabella could answer, Alessandro moved between them, his presence immediately commanding. Viviana, he said, his voice dangerously calm. Isabella is my grandfather's guest. You will show her respect in this house. Viviana blinked in shock. What? You heard me. Alessandro, I'm trying to protect you. Can't you see what she's doing? Alessandro's jaw tightened. What I see is someone making assumptions and insults. Isabella has done nothing but show kindness to my family. Viviana's face went pale, then red. This had never happened before. Alessandro had never defended another woman against her. Ever. She forced a tight smile. Fine. But don't come crying to me when she shows her true colors. She spun on her designer heels and stormed out, her Ferrari roaring to life moments later. In the silence that followed, Alessandro turned to Isabella. I apologize for that. Isabella shook her head, still shaken. It's okay. She's right about one thing. I don't belong in this world. Stop, Alessandro said firmly. He stepped closer, his dark eyes intense. You belong anywhere you choose to be. Don't let people like Viviana make you feel less than you are. Isabella looked up at him, and something shifted in the air between them. Something electric and terrifying and wonderful all at once. That evening, Signore Moretti called Alessandro into his study. "That woman Viviana," the old man said, pouring himself a glass of wine. "She's poison, Alessandro. Absolute poison." Alessandro sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, Nonno." "Then why do you tolerate her?" "Because her father was Papa's closest friend. Because I owe the Castellano family respect. But Nonno, you should know, Viviana and I have never been together. Not romantically. She just assumed." Signore Moretti nodded knowingly. "She assumed because you never corrected her. But I'll tell you something, my boy. If you marry a woman like that, you'll regret it every day of your life. She doesn't love you. She loves what you can give her." Alessandro was quiet for a long moment. "And Isabella?" The old man smiled. "Isabella doesn't want anything from you. That's exactly why she's perfect." The next morning, Isabella approached Alessandro in his study. She'd been thinking all night, and she knew what she had to do. "Signore Alessandro," she said formally, "I need to find work." He looked up from his laptop. "Work? Yes. I can't just stay here for free. I need to earn my own money, support myself. I need my independence back." Alessandro studied her for a long moment. Then a small smile played at his lips. "I actually have a position available," he said casually. "I've been looking for a new executive secretary." Isabella's eyes widened. At Impro headquarters?" "Yes. The position is demanding, but well compensated. You'd be working directly with me, managing schedules, coordinating meetings, handling confidential matters." He paused. "You're intelligent, hardworking, and trustworthy. You'd be perfect for it." Isabella's heart raced. Working at Impro, one of the most prestigious fashion companies in the world? It was an opportunity she'd never dreamed possible. I don't know," she whispered. "It's too much." "Take the night to think about it," Alessandro said. But his eyes held a challenge. "Do you have the courage to step into this world?" That evening, Signore Moretti found Isabella in the garden. "My dear," he said gently, "you should take this chance. You deserve something good in your life." Isabella bit her lip. "But what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough?" The old man took her hand. "You helped me when you had every reason to walk away. You gave me your last money when you needed it yourself. You are more than good enough, Isabella Romano. It's time you started believing that." Isabella looked into his kind, weathered face and felt tears prick her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." Signore Moretti smiled, his eyes twinkling with a secret knowledge. Because he knew something Isabella and Alessandro didn't know yet. He knew they were falling in love. And he had every intention of making sure they figured it out. Isabella's first day at Impro Fashion Group headquarters was like stepping into another universe. The building was a masterpiece of glass and steel, towering over Milan like a crystal monument to luxury. Inside, everything was sleek, modern, and intimidating. Employees in designer clothes rushed through marble corridors, speaking rapid Italian and carrying tablets and coffee. Isabella wore her best outfit, which was still obviously cheap compared to everyone else, and tried to project confidence she didn't feel. The reception area fell silent when she entered. A woman in a tight black dress looked her up and down with barely concealed contempt. "You must be the new secretary." "Yes, I'm Isabella Romano." The woman's lips curled. "I'm Francesca. Good luck. You'll need it." As Isabella was escorted to the executive floor, she heard the whispers start. "That's her? That's the one who got the position. I heard she slept with someone in HR. Obviously. Look at her clothes. She didn't get here on merit." Isabella's cheeks burned, but she kept walking. By lunchtime, the rumors had spread like wildfire, and Isabella knew exactly who had started them. Viviana Castellano was a senior manager at Impro, something Isabella hadn't known. And she was using every ounce of her power to destroy Isabella's reputation. She's Alessandro's mistress, obviously. She's a gold digger who trapped the poor man. She probably grew up in the slums. When Isabella walked into the break room, conversations stopped. People stared. Someone laughed mockingly. "Look who it is." A man in an expensive suit said loudly. "The girl who climbed her way to the top on her back." Isabella felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She held her head high, got her coffee, and walked out. She didn't see Alessandro standing in the hallway, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing with fury. That afternoon, Alessandro called a company-wide meeting. Every manager, every senior staff member, everyone packed into the main conference room. Viviana sat at the head of the table, smug and satisfied. She'd successfully poisoned everyone against Isabella. Soon, the girl would quit, and everything would go back to normal. Alessandro walked in, and the room went silent. He stood at the front, his presence commanding immediate attention. "I want to address something," he said, his voice cold and clear. "The rumors about Isabella Romano." Viviana smiled slightly. Finally, he was going to fire her. "Isabella saved my grandfather's life," Alessandro continued, his words dropping like stones. "When he was being mocked and humiliated in one of our stores, she was the only person who showed him basic human decency." Murmurs rippled through the room. She gave him her last money without asking for anything in return. She treated him with respect when everyone else treated him like garbage. Alessandro's eyes swept the room, and people squirmed under his gaze. And now she's here working for this company, and what does she receive? Gossip. Lies. Cruelty. His voice hardened to steel. "Let me be absolutely clear. Isabella Romano has more integrity in her little finger than most of you have in your entire bodies." Viviana's smile vanished. "If I hear one more word, one more rumor, one more whisper about Isabella that isn't work-related, I will personally fire the person responsible." The room was dead silent. Alessandro's gaze landed on Viviana. "And that includes senior management. No one is exempt." Viviana's face went white, then red. She had been humiliated in front of everyone. As the meeting ended and people filed out quietly, Isabella stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. Alessandro had just defended her. Publicly. Powerfully. Their eyes met across the room, and Isabella felt her heart do something she'd never felt before. A flutter, a skip, a recognition of something deeper than gratitude. Maybe, just maybe, she was falling in love with Alessandro Moretti. And that was terrifying. Viviana stormed into Alessandro's office after everyone left, slamming the door behind her. "How dare you embarrass me like that?" she shrieked. Alessandro didn't even look up from his desk. "Watch your tone, Viviana. Watch my tone. Alessandro, everyone in Milan sees me as your future wife. Do you know what this does to my reputation?" Now Alessandro did look up, and his expression was ice cold. "Then perhaps you should have thought about your reputation before you started a campaign of lies against an innocent woman." "Innocent?" Viviana laughed bitterly. "She's playing you. Can't you see that?" Alessandro stood slowly, his full height and presence making Viviana take an involuntary step back. "Let me make something very clear," he said quietly. "We have never been together." Viviana froze. "I never asked you to be my girlfriend. I never gave you a ring. I never made you any promises. Whatever relationship you think we have exists only in your imagination. But everyone thinks." "I don't care what everyone thinks," Alessandro said firmly. "I care about the truth. And the truth is you mean nothing to me romantically. You never have." The words hit Viviana like a slap. Years of assumptions, years of building an identity around being Alessandro's woman, shattered in seconds. "So stop acting possessive," Alessandro continued. "Stop attacking Isabella. And stop pretending you have any claim over my life." Viviana's hands shook. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing. Without another word, she turned and fled from his office, mascara starting to run down her perfectly made-up face. As days passed, something beautiful began to bloom. Alessandro and Isabella worked closely together, and with each passing hour, the connection between them grew stronger. Late nights reviewing contracts. Early mornings preparing presentations. Quiet conversations over coffee. Alessandro found himself watching her when she didn't notice. The way she bit her lip when concentrating. The way she treated even the janitors with respect. The way she never complained, never asked for special treatment, never used his name to get ahead. And Isabella was discovering that beneath Alessandro's intimidating exterior was a man of deep intelligence, unexpected humor, and surprising gentleness. One evening, they were alone in his office, the city lights of Milan twinkling below. "Isabella," Alessandro said suddenly, setting down his pen. She looked up from her laptop. "Yes." He stood, walking around his desk until he was standing in front of her. His expression was intense, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "Have dinner with me." Isabella's heart stopped. "What? Not as your employer. Not as a thank you. Just you and me. Dinner." Isabella's breath caught. "Alessandro, I know this is complicated," he said softly. "I know the world will judge us. I know Viviana will lose her mind. But Isabella," he reached for her hand, "I can't stop thinking about you." Tears pricked Isabella's eyes. "What about all the differences between us? Your world, my world." "I don't care about worlds," Alessandro interrupted. "I care about you." And there, in the quiet of his office with Milan sparkling below, Isabella Romano made a choice that would change everything. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll have dinner with you." Alessandro smiled, truly smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Neither of them knew that someone was watching from the doorway, rage boiling in her chest. Viviana had just witnessed everything, and she was going to make them both pay. When Signore Moretti learned that Alessandro and Isabella were officially dating, he practically danced through the villa. "Finally," he exclaimed, pulling Isabella into a warm embrace. "My grandson has finally opened his eyes." He had adored Isabella from the moment she'd given him water in that boutique. And now, seeing her and Alessandro together, he felt a deep satisfaction. This was right. This was how it should be. But Lady Francesca Moretti, Alessandro's mother, felt very differently. She arrived at the villa 3 days later, a whirlwind of Chanel and cold fury. Lady Francesca was aristocracy personified. Elegant, refined, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting her family's status. She had spent decades building the Moretti name into something legendary. And now her son was dating a shop girl? Unacceptable. The moment she saw Isabella in the garden, her lips pressed into a thin line. "So," she said coldly, approaching with measured steps, "you're the girl causing all this trouble." Isabella stood, nervous but holding her ground. "Lady Moretti, it's an honor to." "Save it." Francesca's voice could cut glass. "Let me be frank. You don't belong here. You don't belong with my son. And this little fantasy you're living will end very soon." "Mother!" Alessandro appeared, his voice sharp. "That's enough." "Enough!" Francesca turned to her son. "Alessandro, this girl is using you. She sees your wealth, your power, your name." "She refused a Maserati," Alessandro interrupted coldly. "She gave away her last money to help grandfather. She's never asked me for anything." Francesca faltered slightly but recovered. "Then she's smarter than I thought. Playing the long game." "You're wrong about her," Alessandro said firmly. Mother and son stared at each other, a battle of wills that had been years in the making. Finally, Francesca spoke, her voice icy. "We'll see." Viviana knew she was running out of time. Alessandro had made his choice. Isabella had won. Unless, late that night, Viviana used her manager keycard to access the villa's private jewelry room, a privilege she'd been granted years ago as a trusted family friend. Inside, behind glass cases, lay millions of euros worth of jewelry. Heirlooms passed down through generations. The Moretti legacy, preserved in diamonds and gold. Viviana's eyes landed on a specific piece, an emerald brooch encrusted with rare Colombian emeralds, worth over 5 million euros. It had belonged to Alessandro's great-grandmother. She carefully deactivated the alarm using a code she'd memorized, opened the case, and slipped the brooch into her designer handbag. Then, with a cold smile, she made her way to Isabella's room. Isabella was asleep, exhausted from a long day at work. She didn't hear the door open, didn't hear the soft footsteps, didn't know that Viviana was carefully placing the stolen brooch in her desk drawer. Viviana stood there for a moment, looking at Isabella's sleeping face with pure hatred. "Game over," she whispered. The next morning, chaos erupted. Isabella was getting ready for work when the villa doors burst open. Guards flooded in. Behind them, Lady Francesca, Viviana, and several members of the extended Moretti family. "What's happening?" Isabella asked, her heart pounding. A security guard stepped forward. "Miss Romano, we need you to come with us." "Why? What's wrong?" Viviana stepped forward, her face the picture of fake distress. Tears, actual tears, rolled down her cheeks. I didn't want to believe it, she said, her voice breaking. But when the maids reported the missing brooch, Isabella's blood ran cold. What brooch? The emerald brooch, Lady Francesca said coldly. A priceless family heirloom. And the maids found it hidden in your room. What? No. That's impossible. I didn't. We have evidence, Viviana interrupted, producing the brooch from a silk bag. It was in your desk drawer. The room exploded with whispers. Family members shook their heads in disgust. I knew it, Lady Francesca said. A thief. Just another common criminal trying to steal from our family. Isabella felt her world spinning. No, please, I didn't take anything. I would never. Of course you'd deny it, Viviana said, wiping her fake tears. They always do. Isabella's eyes filled with real tears. She looked desperately around the room, searching for someone, anyone, who believed her. And then she saw him. Alessandro stood at the entrance, his face unreadable. Alessandro, Isabella whispered, her voice breaking. Please. You know me. You know I didn't do this. For a terrible moment, he said nothing. Then finally he spoke. Everyone stop. The room went quiet. Alessandro walked forward slowly, his eyes never leaving Isabella's face. Isabella is not a thief. Viviana's confident expression flickered. Alessandro, the evidence. I don't care about evidence that can be planted, he said sharply. He turned to address the entire room. I know Isabella's character. She has more integrity than most people in this room. My son, don't be naive, Lady Francesca began. Enough! The word echoed through the marble halls. Everyone froze. Alessandro rarely raised his voice. But then Signore Moretti stepped forward, leaning on his cane, his old eyes sharp and knowing. Stop this circus, he said quietly. Something is wrong here. We are missing something important. He looked at Viviana, and for just a second her mask slipped. That was all Signore Moretti needed. Alessandro, he said calmly. Check the security footage. All of it. 2 hours later, Alessandro sat in his private security room with his tech team, reviewing every second of footage from the past 48 hours. And there it was. Clear as day. Viviana entering the jewelry room at 2:17 a.m. Viviana deactivating the alarm. Viviana taking the brooch. Viviana slipping into Isabella's room at 2:34 a.m. Viviana planting the evidence. Alessandro's hands clenched into fists. He saved the footage to 3 different drives, sent copies to his lawyer, and then stood. It was time to end this. The family had gathered in the main hall, waiting. Isabella sat alone on a chair, looking small and broken. Viviana stood with Lady Francesca, confident in her victory. Then Alessandro entered, carrying a laptop. I have something everyone needs to see, he announced. He set the laptop on a table and pressed play. The room watched in stunned silence as the security footage played. Viviana's theft. The evidence planting. Everything. Gasps filled the air. Lady Francesca's hand flew to her mouth. Family members stared in shock. Viviana's face went from confident to pale to absolutely terrified in seconds. No, she whispered. No, that's fake. It's manipulated. It's authenticated footage from our security system, Alessandro said coldly. Time-stamped. Verified by 3 independent experts in the last hour. He turned to face Viviana fully, and his expression was absolutely merciless. You framed an innocent woman. You stole from my family. You betrayed every bit of trust we ever gave you. Alessandro, please, I did it because I love you. Viviana's voice rose to a desperate shriek. She was taking you away from me. I had to. You had to nothing, Alessandro said, his voice like ice. Security. 2 guards stepped forward immediately. No, please. Alessandro, you can't. You're under arrest for theft and conspiracy, one guard said, pulling out handcuffs. I love you, Viviana screamed as they dragged her toward the door. I've always loved you. She's nothing. Nothing. Her voice echoed through the marble halls until finally, the door closed behind her. Silence fell. Then Alessandro turned to Isabella, who sat frozen with shock, tears streaming down her face. He crossed the room in 3 strides, knelt in front of her, and took her trembling hands in his. I'm sorry, he said softly. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Isabella couldn't speak. She just sobbed, all the fear and humiliation and pain pouring out. Alessandro pulled her into his arms and held her as she cried. Lady Francesca stood to the side, watching. For the first time, she saw what her son saw. Not a gold digger. Not a social climber. Just a girl who had been hurt, who had endured cruelty with grace, who had never once fought back with the same weapons used against her. I misjudged you, Lady Francesca said quietly. Isabella looked up, surprised. Francesca stepped forward, her aristocratic mask cracking slightly. My son is lucky to have you. And I hope you'll allow me the chance to know you better. Isabella nodded, unable to speak. For the first time since arriving at the villa, she felt something she'd never felt before. Safe. 3 days later, Alessandro asked Isabella to meet him at a private rooftop restaurant, the most exclusive in Milan, where only the elite could secure reservations. Isabella wore a simple but elegant dress that Signore Moretti had insisted on buying her. She felt nervous, unsure why Alessandro had asked her here. The rooftop was breathtaking. Candles flickered in the evening breeze. The lights of Milan spread out below like a carpet of stars. A single table sat in the center, draped in white linen, surrounded by roses. And there stood Alessandro, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark suit. Isabella, he said softly, extending his hand. She took it, her heart racing. He led her to the table, pulled out her chair, and then, he didn't sit across from her. Instead, Alessandro Moretti, billionaire CEO, one of the most powerful men in Europe, got down on one knee. Isabella's hands flew to her mouth. Oh my God! Alessandro pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was the most stunning ring Isabella had ever seen. A rare blue diamond surrounded by smaller white diamonds, set in platinum. Isabella Romano, Alessandro began, his voice thick with emotion. You walked into my life when I least expected it. You showed me what real kindness looks like, what real strength is, what real love means. Tears streamed down Isabella's face. You refused my gifts because you wanted to earn your own way. You gave away your last money to help a stranger. You endured cruelty and never became cruel yourself. Alessandro's eyes shimmered. You are the strongest, most beautiful person I've ever known. And I don't want to spend another day without you. He took a deep breath. Isabella, will you marry me? The world seemed to hold its breath. Isabella looked at this incredible man kneeling before her. The man who had defended her, believed in her, loved her when she had nothing to offer but herself. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, yes. Alessandro slipped the ring onto her finger, stood, and pulled her into a kiss that made the entire city of Milan disappear. When they finally broke apart, Isabella was laughing and crying at the same time. I love you, Alessandro murmured against her hair. I love you too, Isabella whispered back. And far below, in the streets of Milan, news was already spreading. The engagement announcement would hit every media outlet within hours. Social media would explode. The world would be captivated by the modern Cinderella story. But in one small boutique, a woman named Vivian Beaumont scrolled through her phone and nearly dropped it. The headline stared back at her. Billionaire CEO Alessandro Moretti engaged to former boutique worker Isabella Romano. The same girl she had mocked, humiliated, fired, was now engaged to one of the richest men in Europe. Vivian felt her world tilt. And she knew that karma was real. The next day, Alessandro and Isabella walked into Elegance Boutique hand in hand. The staff froze. Customers gasped. Claudette dropped a scarf. And Vivian's face went absolutely white. Hello, Vivian, Alessandro said coldly. Vivian forced a smile, her voice shaking. And Mr. Moretti. What an unexpected. I came to tell you something personally, Alessandro interrupted. Something I wanted you to hear from me. Vivian swallowed hard. You're fired. The boutique went silent. You judged people by their appearance. You bullied an employee who did nothing wrong. You mocked my grandfather and threw him out of a store my family owns. Alessandro's voice was sharp as a blade. Discrimination and cruelty have no place in Impro Fashion Group. Consider this your official termination. Vivian's legs nearly gave out. No, please, I didn't know. That's the problem, Alessandro said. You didn't care to know. You just cared about feeling superior. He turned to the other staff members, who stood frozen in terror. Let this be a lesson. Kindness matters. Character matters. And how you treat people when they have nothing says everything about who you are. With that, Alessandro and Isabella turned and walked out, leaving Vivian standing in ruins. As they stepped into the sunlight, Isabella squeezed Alessandro's hand. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me when I was invisible. Alessandro stopped, turned to face her, and cupped her cheek gently. You were never invisible, amore. You were just surrounded by blind people. The wedding of Isabella Romano and Alessandro Moretti was the event of the decade. It took place in the most beautiful cathedral in Milan, with thousands of roses imported from Ecuador, an orchestra flown in from Vienna, and a guest list that read like a who's who of European elite. Royalty attended. Celebrities, business magnates, fashion designers. The most powerful people in the world gathered to witness this unlikely love story. But none of them shone brighter than the bride. Isabella walked down the aisle in a custom couture gown designed exclusively for her. Ivory silk embroidered with thousands of tiny diamonds, a 20-foot train carried by 6 attendants, and a tiara that had belonged to Italian royalty. She looked like a queen. But more importantly, she looked happy. Alessandro stood at the altar, and when he saw her, tears filled his eyes for the first time in his adult life. Bella, he whispered as she reached him. You are breathtaking. The ceremony was beautiful, emotional, perfect. But the most touching moment came during the reception. Signore Moretti stood, his old eyes sparkling with joy, and raised his glass. Many years ago, he said, his voice carrying through the grand ballroom, I walked into a boutique dressed as a poor man. And everyone except one person, treated me with cruelty. He looked at Isabella with infinite love. That one person showed me kindness when she had every reason to walk away. She gave me her last money. She gave me dignity. She gave me hope. The room was silent, hanging on every word. Today, I give her something in return. He nodded to an attendant, who brought forward an antique box. This brooch, Signore Moretti said, opening the box to reveal a stunning golden piece encrusted with rare sapphires, has been passed down through the Moretti family for 10 generations. It belongs to the matriarch, the woman who will carry our family's heart forward. He walked slowly to Isabella and carefully pinned it to her gown. Welcome to our family, my beautiful granddaughter. You are its greatest treasure. Isabella burst into tears. The entire room erupted in applause. And then Alessandro pulled her close and whispered in her ear, I have one more gift for you. He led her to a private balcony overlooking the city. From a velvet box, he lifted the most extraordinary necklace anyone had ever seen. The Oceano Stellar, the Stellar Ocean, a masterpiece of rare blue diamonds, the same color as Isabella's engagement ring, worth 40 million euros. Only 5 existed in the world, and this was the finest. Alessandro, Isabella breathed. This is too much. He fastened it around her neck, his fingers gentle. Then he turned her to face him, his eyes blazing with emotion. You gave me everything when you had nothing, he said. You showed me what love really is. And my love for you, Isabella, is as deep as the ocean and as endless as the stars. Isabella threw her arms around him. I love you so much. I love you more, Alessandro whispered, and kissed her as fireworks exploded over Milan. Far away, in a small apartment, Vivian sat in darkness, scrolling through photos of the wedding on her phone. Isabella in her stunning gown. Alessandro looking at her like she was his entire world. The happiness, the luxury, the fairy tale ending. Everything Vivian had wanted. Everything she had tried to steal. All of it gone because she had been cruel to the wrong person. And in a prison cell across the city, Viviana Castellano sat on a thin mattress, her designer clothes replaced with prison uniforms, her perfect life destroyed. Both women had learned the same lesson too late. Cruelty has a price, and kindness has a reward. Years later, Isabella Romano Moretti sat in the garden of Villa Moretti, watching her children play. She was now the CEO of Impro's charitable foundation, using her position to help people who had once been just like her, struggling, invisible, forgotten. Alessandro walked out, carrying 2 cups of coffee, and sat beside her. His hair had a few gray strands now, but his love for her had only grown deeper. What are you thinking about? He asked. Isabella smiled. That Tuesday, the glass of water, the moment everything changed. Alessandro took her hand, the one that wore the blue diamond ring. Best investment I ever made. You didn't invest anything, Isabella laughed. I gave him water for free. No, Alessandro said seriously. You invested kindness. And it paid the greatest dividend of all. From the window, Signore Moretti watched them, now ancient but still sharp. He raised his own coffee cup in a silent toast. Goodness is never forgotten, he whispered to himself. And kindness always finds its way home. Remember this, friends. In a world that often rewards cruelty, choose kindness anyway. In a society that values wealth over character, be good anyway. Because one day, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but one day, your kindness will find its way back to you. And when it does, it will bring with it treasures you never imagined. That glass of water? It might just change your life. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember that goodness still matters. Subscribe for more stories of hope, love, and redemption. Until next time, be kind. You never know who's watching. You never know whose life you might change. Ciao, beautiful souls. Until we meet again.